Hi, I'm Ryan the Scion, niche internet micro celebrity, and this is almost every way to cook a steak in Minecraft. What exactly is a steak? Well, a steak is any of the more tender cuts of beef obtained primarily from the two bovine species in the overworld, the cow, or Bos taurus, and the mushroom, or Shiitake taurus. Today we are going to be focusing on just the Bos taurus, as these steaks don't possess the earthy and slightly woodsy flavor profile of the Shiitake taurus, which does make them less complex, but in turn, they are a lot simpler to cook. So let's start with our first cooking method, steak tartare. Steak tartare is a dish of minced raw beef. You could season it with onions or capers. Mushrooms would also be a very nice addition. It has a very rich and bold beefy flavor, kind of like what you'd get with a high-end steak, but with a little more intense beefiness to it. It's not my favorite way to prepare a steak, but since it involves no heat, it can at least be prepared quickly. If you're a fan of eating raw meat, you should definitely give steak tartare a try. Furnace steak. Furnace steak is a Minecraft classic. Just about every Steve and Alex has cooked furnace steak at some point on their journey. The high heat of the furnace helps form that lovely and delicious brown crust that we know as the Maillard reaction. Furnace steak isn't anything special at the end of the day. It's very easy to overcook if you do the classic set it and forget it for a whole 64 stack, but also there's nothing wrong with it. If you want an easy and straightforward steak to prepare, a furnace steak is the way to go. Smoked steak. Smoking is a lovely way to impart additional woody and smoky flavors to your meat. This time around, we are using our fancy Traeger pellet smoker. I would suggest using either cherry or oak pellets, as they imbue the steak with a nicer flavor and aroma than the other available woods, such as mangrove. But in a pinch, birch wood would also be alright. As you can see, the smoker has given the exterior of our steak a gorgeous brown color, and it smells fantastic. The taste is incredibly savory and juicy. It's not just a flat, acrid flavor like you'd get with liquid smoke. You can actually taste the aroma of the cherry pellets we used. This is an absolutely delicious way to cook a steak, and I think personally, I'll be using the smoker a lot more in the future. Campfire steak. Say you're on an adventure, trekking across mountains, and you still want to cook a steak. Then, a campfire steak is the steak for you. Just pile up some logs, light them on fire, and toss the steak directly onto the flames for about a minute or two. Unlike our smoked steak, where we got even browning, the campfire steak, because it's so directly next to the flame, has a bit more of a burnt char to it rather than an evenly brown crust, which makes it taste a little ashy, though there is still a prominent smoky flavor. It's not a perfect steak by any means, but at least it gets you outside. Campfire cow. A campfire cow is another rustic style of cooking steak. Instead of unwrapping the beef before we cook it, this time around we are going to leave it in its protective packaging when we throw it on the fire to cook. As you can see, the steak is very rare. Most of the heat of the campfire was directed into burning off that outer coating of the steak, allowing for a very gentle heating of the meat inside. The steak is very tender and the meat has retained a lot of juice. If you have to cook a steak on a campfire, this is the way to go. Log smoked steak. Continuing on with our outdoor cooking methods, we have the log smoked steak. Unlike with our expensive smoking equipment, this method of smoking steak is a little less precise and a lot more smoky. We are going to be burning a spruce log for this, so that way we can have a really heavy smoke flavor. After a little bit of cooking, our log smoked steak is done. It's got a very deep brown exterior and has actually held in a lot of moisture. It's smoky, savory, and quite tender. If you don't have a smoker and still want that smoky flavor, this isn't a terrible way to achieve that. Kelp smoked steak. Swapping out our large log for a giant bundle of dried kelp, we have the kelp smoked steak. By using dried kelp to smoke our steak, we can switch from that woody, nutty smoke aroma to a deeper, more savory and umami flavored smoke. Once again, we have very solid browning on our steak, and it smells absolutely incredible. You can really taste that larger depth of flavor the kelp lends to the steak. If you're having a little cookout with friends and you want to impress them, this is definitely going to work. Soul smoked steak. Say you're having a hankering for a steak, but you want to spice it up with powerful, unctuous flavors of the embittered souls of the damned. Well, then let me introduce to you the soul smoked steak. When soul smoking a steak, you can choose between soul soil and soul sand for the fire base. I prefer using soul sand over soul soil, as the looser pack of the material really allows for an easier escape of the entrapped malevolent spirits. As you can see, the soul smoked steak has an unbelievably uniform brown crust. It's wall-to-wall medium rare on the inside, and when you bite into it, you can almost feel the cursed spirits clawing their way out of your mouth for one last desperate attempt at salvation. If you've never had a soul smoked steak before, add it to your bucket list. It's definitely not one to miss. Soul campfired steak. Taking another swing at campfire cooking, we are going with a soul campfired steak. Instead of just a base of logs, we've sprinkled in a light dusting of soul sand to hopefully imbue our steak with a gentler hint of eternal damnation than that of the soul smoked steak. As you can see, our soul campfired steak is very, very rare. In fact, yeah, it's actually just raw meat. It does surprisingly still have that smoky flavor of a wayward soul. If you're looking for a spirit-fueled steak and you don't mind that it's not actually cooked, then try out a soul campfired steak. Lava-bathed steak. This one is pretty straightforward. We are simply going to drop our steak directly into molten lava and see what happens. Ooh, yeah, that's definitely not a successful method of cooking steak. The lava is so hot that the steak completely burned away. Definitely don't try this one at home. Lava blade steak. Attempting to refine the lava cooking method, we have the lava blade steak. Hopefully, by using just the thinnest possible layer of lava, we can sear our steak without fully disintegrating it. And that's also a failure. Lava bucketed steak. Next up, we have yet another classic cooking method, the lava bucket steak. By precisely pouring superheated rocks onto our steak and picking it back up, we can have a finer control on how the steak is heated. As you can see, with this lava bucket method, we have less char and even more browning. The steak is still more on the well done side than I would personally like, but aromatically it has hints of that hellish fire and brimstone that only lava can provide. This is definitely the best lava cooking method we've seen today. And if lava cooking is your style, then I would say you should definitely give this a try. Slow lava bathed steak. Okay, we can definitely harness the cooking power of lava this time. By throwing in a drop chute with a cobweb at the bottom, we can slow the descent of our steaks into the lava so that they get just a hint of that high temperature without being fully engulfed. Oh my god, it actually worked. The steaks are a little charred from the unreasonably high heat of the molten rock, but they didn't burn up. Is this a great way to cook a steak? Absolutely not. But is it a successful way to cook a steak? I'd have to say yes. Cauldron steak. If you're looking for a lava-seared steak and you got a few extra diamonds lying around to spend on fancy equipment, then you could try the cauldron steak. Use of advanced redstone technology here does make this a more complex way to lava-sear a steak, but the high skill cap is a worthwhile trade-off for the added machine precision. Compared to the other lava steaks, you can see how the cauldron steak has almost no char at all. The interior is a nice medium rare, the accents of molten rock are very poignant, and it altogether has a larger depth of flavor than the other molten methods. If you can spare the diamonds for this highly expensive equipment, I would say it's definitely worthwhile. Cold seared steak. Cold seared steak is a little bit of a misnomer, as we aren't actually searing the steak with the cold. This is really just a more advanced take on the slow lava bath cooking method, where the steak is initially submerged in powdered snow to bring its core temperature down quite low before giving it that quick exterior molten sear. And oh my goodness, this steak is pristine. A perfectly solid brown crust, wall-to-wall pink interior, and just the perfect hint of lava, where you get the essence of liquid rock without it being terribly overpowering. It may be a little more expensive of a cooking method, with every steak needing a new block of powdered snow, but for this perfectly cooked steak, it's more than worth the cost. Flambeau steak. Flambeau, or
flambe, for the French viewers, is a cooking method that involves briefly alighting the exterior of your food, which can be easily achieved by using a bow with the flame enchantment. A hallmark of the flame bow method is this perfectly uniform crust. The steak is cooked to a very nice medium rare, and it tastes fine. This is a great way of cooking a steak for beginners because of how simple it is, but it doesn't really add any desirable complexity to the taste of the steak. If you're a novice chef, definitely give the flame bow method a try though. Fire arrow steak. Similar to flame bowing a steak, fire arrow steak is achieved via combustible projectiles. This time around, instead of enchanting our bow with powerful and unseen dark magic, we're just gonna shoot it through an open flame. Yeah, this steak turned out almost exactly like the flame bow steak, but it has a little bit more of that nutty, smoky flavor that the arrow picked up while it was traveling through the open flame. This is still a very achievable way to cook a steak for novice chefs, but it is definitely a step up compared to the flame bow method. Lava arrow steak. A lava arrow steak is exactly what you'd expect. An arrow shot through lava. The lava arrow steak is a little more charred than the fire arrow steak. This is most likely due to the arrow actually depositing little bits of lava directly upon the steak, instead of just lighting it on fire as it passes through the lava. You do get some of those more acrid notes of brimstone, and the steak is a little bit tougher, and overall it's alright. This is definitely the trickiest projectile method we've seen so far, so if you attempt this at home, you should proceed with caution. Automatic fire arrow steak. Say you want that smoky goodness of a fire arrow steak, but you're a little too lazy to do it yourself, but you also happen to have a bit of extra money lying around. Well, then let me introduce to you the automatic fire arrow steak. To operate this equipment, you simply need to flick this lever to start the cooking process, and then flick it again once the steak reaches a desired level of doneness. I am personally not much of a fan of single-use appliances, but this does greatly simplify the task of fire arrow cooking. If you want fire arrow steaks without the hassle, then look no further. Automatic lava arrow steak. Now, I know this may look like the exact same piece of equipment as the automatic fire arrow steak machine, but trust me, it's different. It has lava. Now, this does give you the perfect lava arrow style of steak without any hassle, but do you really need to make a poorly cooked steak easier to obtain? I definitely wouldn't recommend this. The steak is chewy and well done, and it's terrible. Really, it's trash. Fire aspect steak. Moving away from projectile-based cooking, we have the fire aspect steak. The fire aspect steak can be cooked with any nondescript blade that has been sufficiently imbued with the intertwined souls of its wielder and any 5th or 6th circle infernal demon. The unquenchable godless flames leave an almost imperceptible hint of lemon flavor, which is entirely unexpected, but not wholly unwelcome. If you want to make an everlasting pact of eternal damnation, then this is definitely the best cooking method for you. Fire aspect 2 steak. Just enchant the sword more. Sous vide steak. Back to the realm of fancy kitchen gadgets, we have the sous vide, or, for my French-speaking audience, the sous vide. The magma blocks at the base here hold this water bath at a consistent heat, so that way when we immerse our steak, we can bring it to a precise temperature. In this case, it's 125 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 52 Celsius. As you can see, our steak is cooked perfectly rare, though because it was in the sous vide, it hasn't taken on any of that Maillard reaction browning, since that occurs around 250 to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. After giving it a quick sear in the furnace, our sous vide steak is done. As you can see, we have an absolutely gorgeous brown crust with perfectly even wall-to-wall pink coloration on the interior. This is truly a perfect steak, but the price we had to pay was the special equipment and a lot of time waiting for the steak to slowly come up to temp. Is it worth it? Well, if you're a perfectionist, then I'd say yes. Otherwise, just let a sous vide steak be a special, fancy restaurant date occasion. Dispensed lava steak. Introducing yet another piece of specialized equipment, we have the dispensed lava steak. Our treated glass chamber will retain the heat output by the lava atop to act essentially as a very high temperature broiler. Look at that beautiful crust. The high heat of the lava nicely browns the exterior of the steak, and the very short cooking time allows the interior of the steak to retain almost all of its moisture. This is a very nice steak.
Dispensed fire steak. Thankfully, this dispenser machine is multi-use, which is a step up from the sous vide. However, the dispensed fire setting is slightly more manual, as you must put out the fire by hand or the steak will completely burn up. This steak is nicely browned with little bits of char around the edges, probably because I didn't put the fire out fast enough. This is a complicated and somewhat skill-intensive way to cook a steak, but if you learn to master this equipment, you can make some very nice steaks quite quickly.
Lightning steak. For our more adventurous viewers out there, we have the lightning steak. Simply take your steak out into the wrath of one of Mother Nature's terrifyingly beautiful static discharge storms and, just wait. It's taking a bit, so I'm just gonna speed up time real quick. Okay, so never mind. Lightning rod steak. Okay. This time around, we are going to control forces beyond our comprehension with this little chunk of copper. If we just wait a moment, we should have a cooked steak in no time. Ah, there we go. It's a little crispy, and I don't mean in a good way. It has a distinct odor of singed hair, which is, it's quite unpleasant. I would have to say that this is almost assuredly not worth the effort. Channeled lightning steak. The word trident comes from tri, meaning three, and the Proto-Indo-European root dent, meaning tooth. Hence, a trident is a three-toothed spear, and a quadent is a fork. Let's murder this cow. Ah, yes, steak. Flint and steel steak. Imagine you really want to eat a steak, but the only worldly possessions your ex-wife left you after the divorce are a chunk of flint, a solitary ingot of iron, and one slab of raw beef. Well, then have no fear, for you may no longer have your kids, but you do have everything you need to make a flint and steel steak. Simply alight the ground beneath the beef, and lo and behold, you have a shoddily cooked steak with little bits of dirt on it. Is it good? Absolutely not. Fire dropped steak. The goal with the fire drop steak is to give the quickest possible sear to our steak. We can achieve this by accelerating our uncooked beef at 9.8 meters per second directly into an open flame. This is accomplished by simply pushing the beef off this platform. And wow, just look at that. We have a lovely exterior sear and the inside is so rare that it's almost blue. If you're a fan of incredibly rare steak, then this method is definitely something you should try out. Console command steak. Say you want to make a hardcore Minecraft video, but you don't really want to put in the time or the effort because let's face it, no one's gonna know, and all you want is that sweet, sweet clout. Well, then let me introduce to you the console command steak. Simply open your game to LAN, enable cheats, and give yourself a steak. Now, it may be pretty rubbery, taste of deceit and taking advantage of the naivety of your audience, but the most important part of this flavor profile is that absolutely delicious taste of ad revenue. I personally am not a fan of this style of steak, but I know a few people who swear by this method. Creative menu steak. Imagine playing Minecraft for the creative building aspect instead of the go-to survival mode. Well, when it comes time to decorate the interior of perhaps a kitchen, the quickest possible method is to open the creative menu, grab out a steak, and place it in an item frame on a table to act as a dinner plate. Now, I definitely wouldn't recommend eating this steak due to the ungodly amount of preservatives it has to be filled with so it can stay indefinitely in the creative menu. But if you just want a little extra decoration for a kitchen or restaurant build, then this is perfect. Pan-seared steak. Next, we have yet another classic, the pan-seared steak. Thoroughly season both sides of your steak with salt, pepper, and garlic powder, and leave it to rest for 30 minutes to an hour. Then, in a ripping hot cast iron, render out the fat cap. Then sear one side in the rendered fat for about a minute. Flip and sear the other side. Then add in butter and aromatics such as thyme and rosemary. Butter baste your steak until it reaches an internal temp of 125 degrees and let it rest on a cutting board for a few minutes. Then, sit back and enjoy. Delicious. Veal.
Are you a sensitive guy, gal, or non-binary pal, and you think that a regular steak is a bit too tough or chewy for you? Well, then let me introduce to you veal. Veal is meat from a young cow, which is known for being softer and more tender than beef, which is meat from an older cow. Now, we just need to butcher this calf real quick, and... I could have sworn this dropped meat. Villager steak. Okay, so before any of you freak out, we are not cooking and eating a villager here. They don't drop meat when they die, so we've already been robbed of that opportunity. A villager steak is actually a reward that the butcher villagers will sometimes give you after you have saved their village from a raid. They'll be so happy that you defended them from the pillagers that they will shower you with a whole variety of gifts, with the only one that we actually care about today being the cooked steak. Oh, there we go. This steak is surprisingly well prepared. It is a very even brown crust with subtle hints of rosemary. This is an absolutely spectacular steak. Is it worth it to go through an entire raid just to get one though? I'll leave that for you to determine for yourself. Gas-fired steak. I'm just gonna preface this with, do not try this at home. Trapping a screaming, flying baby ghost demon cloud thing in a small box just to hopefully cook a steak with its rampant destruction is, well, not the safest way to cook a steak. But hey, we're gonna try it anyways. Oh, this is giving me anxiety. Alrighty, so here's the gas steak. It's quite blackened and not very pretty looking due to all of the explosions ripping it to shreds. It's definitely not raw, so that's a plus. Overall, it's not a good steak, and I can't in good conscience recommend this. Blaze steak. Similar to the gas-fired steak, we are once again trapping ourselves inside of a cube with actual creatures from hell, so hopefully I don't die. Yeah, this is not... Okay, so I managed to survive again, so that's nice. The steak, on the other hand, is very much burnt. This is neither a good nor a fun way to cook a steak. Simply just don't do this. Pretty much any other method would be better. TNT steak. We are once again in the blast chamber because trinitrotoluene is a literal explosive. Thankfully, it's quite stable, so we don't have to worry about accidental explosions. The goal here is to use the high energy of the detonation to rapidly cook the steak. Don't know if it'll work, but here goes nothing. Okay, so this is quite interesting. The steak hasn't really been cooked at all. It is slightly warm to the touch, but mostly it's been completely eviscerated by the explosion. I'd have to say that this is not a success. TNT minecart steak. Are you serious? I mean, did we not learn anything from that previous method? No, look at me. How would a minecart make the steak cooked this time? Explain that. Please explain that, because I personally don't understand why you think it would be different. Hi, gang. This time around, we are cooking our steak using a TNT minecart. The minecart should help the steak get cooked. Let's watch. Yeah, okay, this is exactly what I was... End crystal steak. Okay, so maybe the reaction temperature of TNT just isn't hot enough to cook a steak. So that means we should try an even bigger explosion. Meet the end crystal steak. This baby is definitely capable of breaking down an entire cow into its constituent parts, but let's hope it can denature some of those proteins in the process. Here goes nothing. Yeah, so that was quite dangerous, and it also didn't work. Definitely avoid cooking with all explosives. It's not successful. It's just not a safe or successful way to cook. I can't in good conscience recommend that. Frostburn steak. It may have burn within the name, but I have a very strong feeling that frost burning a steak isn't going to cook it at all. But we will still try it out and see what happens.
Yeah, the steak ended up raw, and it's so frozen that I can't even bite into it. This seems like it's more of a way to preserve raw meat than prepare it for consumption. So at least on the cooking side, I'd have to say this is a failure. Fireworks steak. Whether it's the 4th of July, New Year's, or any other arbitrary celebration, a firework steak is sure to wow whoever you make it for. To prepare a firework steak, you simply need to enclose the steak within a confined space and then just launch a few firework rockets until the steak is done. This one turned out a bit on the raw side, but I'm sure if you use a few more firework rockets than I did, the steak will turn out just fine. This is definitely a very flashy way to cook a steak, and if you're cooking at a party, definitely try it out. Magma steak. If you're ever seemingly trapped in hell like I currently find myself to be, and you want to prepare a nice steak for yourself without burning it, then a magma steak is the way to go. By gently grilling our steak over these hot coals for a brief period of time, we end up with a rare steak that is nicely heated through and fully pink. It may seem like this is a bit too rare, but with all of the lava around, we are honestly lucky to not have fully burned the steak away. Definitely a solid 5 out of 10. Stone pressed steak. Next to the sous vide, this is probably the most expensive single-use piece of kitchen equipment I own. The stone press here allows for raw beef to be dropped in from on top into the pressing chamber, where you flick this lever to start the crushing process. As soon as the steak reaches your desired level of tenderness, you can flick this lever again to dispense the cooked steak outside of the stone press. The steak comes out completely raw, but the strong pressing action of the giant stones really do a lot of work to tenderize this steak. If you're someone who prefers their steak to be medium well or well done, then this is a great first step to allow your steak to be a little more tender while still cooking it way too much. This is definitely an unnecessary luxury, but if you have the money and you really enjoy very tender steaks, it's definitely worthwhile. Honey glazed steak. If you want to spice up your steak with a sweet accent of honey, then try a honey glazed steak. All you have to do to enjoy a honey glazed steak is place your raw steak in this honey press, flick the lever, and wait for the magic to happen. It may take a moment or two, but I'm sure the honey will pair nicely with this steak. It's probably just a slow method of cooking. You see, one of the most difficult steps is mastering the art of patience. Torch steak. Torches, introduced all the way back in Minecraft InDev, are one of the oldest sources of light and fire in the entire game. Using this ancient technology, we can try to cook a steak the same way those Minecrafters of old used to. This method is probably not going to be all that fast because of how small a torch flame is, but if we give it time, I'm sure we can have a nicely cooked steak eventually. Okay, this is actually painful how slow this is. Maybe just use one of the newer methods introduced in the past decade instead. Torch flower steak. Mentioning things introduced in the game in the past decade, we have the torch flower steak. The torch flower is one of Minecraft's newest blocks. Much like the torch, it provides a small amount of light and heat, which should be enough to cook a steak. It doesn't seem to be cooking, though. Does this even produce light? Candle cooked steak. I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. I'm starting to think that despite the candles being an open flame, this won't actually work out. But, you know, let's see. And I'm gonna go with that is, nope. Ceviche steak. Ceviche is typically a fish or shellfish dish that has been cured in some sort of citric acid like lemon or lime juice. Now, we don't have lemons or limes in Minecraft yet, but this splash potion of harming is quite a strong acid, so this should do the trick. As you can see, the steak is more cured than it is cooked. It's got a very strong, beefy flavor like that of the steak tartare we made earlier. You can taste those sharp notes of acidity, and overall, I think this is a very delicious steak. If you have some citrus fruits on hand, or maybe some splash potions of harming, then maybe consider trying out ceviche steak. Dragon's breath steak.
Say you're in the middle of fighting the Ender Dragon and you need to eat something, but you only have an uncooked steak with you. Well, then look no further than the Dragon's Breath steak. Simply hold your steak out at a safe distance from yourself and wait for Jean to fly down and assist you. Definitely do be careful though, as the Dragon's Breath could easily cook you as well. From the looks of it, our steak is, well, once again, more cured than cooked. This actually has quite a similar texture to the ceviche we just made. What I do find interesting though is that the Dragon's Breath has given the steak a bit of an artificial grape flavor. This is definitely one of the more dangerous methods of cooking a steak, but if the time and the place fits, you might as well try it out. Gravity steak. Okay, so the idea here is that if we drop the steak from high enough up, the friction between the steak and the particles in the atmosphere should provide enough heat to cook the steak before it hits the ground, similar to an astronaut coming back in on re-entry from a trip to the International Space Station. I've never tried this myself before, but let's see if it works. That's gonna be a no. Entity cramming steak. Okay, so this one's a bit rough, but if you're gonna factory farm your steak, you could always try cooking it via entity cramming. If we pack enough cows into one small, horribly confined space, the friction generated between the cows will start to quickly cook them alive. And through this, we can obtain a cooked steak. So this steak doesn't have any browning at all, and it tastes like sadness. Don't do this. Sweet berry steak. A sweet berry steak is the premier dish of the taiga biome. The sweetness of these small red berries pairs marvelously well with the savoriness of a steak. With this method of cooking, we won't be heating our steak at all. This is because we want to keep the grassier notes of our steak present so that they can be accentuated by the brightness of the sweet berries. To prepare our steak, we will simply drag it through a patch of sweet berry bushes like we have here. The beef will crush the berries, allowing for their juice to spread across the meat, while the berry bushes themselves puncture the exterior of the beef to allow the berry juice to penetrate into the meat. Since this is still uncooked meat, it has texture similar to that of the ceviche or the tartare, but the flavor is a lot more rounded. Where the ceviche hits those sharp peaks of acidity, the sweet berry comes in with a more robust depth of flavor. If you happen to be growing a patch of sweet berries, or you find yourself in a taiga, then absolutely try making a sweet berry steak. Flat iron steak. Just to clarify, we are talking about the flat iron cooking method, not the specific cut of beef that is a flat iron steak. This flat iron method consists of two main parts, with the first being the titular one. We start with tenderizing the steak by dropping a 150-pound anvil on top of it. Then, once our steak is nice and tender, we will move on to step 2, which is to quickly sear in a furnace to get a nice brown crust. This visually looks like a lot of the other cooking methods we've seen today, but the difference is all in the texture. Crushing the steak with that 150-pound anvil really broke down those muscle fibers and have allowed the steak to avoid tensing up so much while cooking. This has to be the softest and most tender steak we've cooked today. The flat iron method doesn't really add any unique flavor to the steak, so combining this with, say, one of the smoking methods should yield impeccable results. Steak.
Don't put steak, put milk steak. She'll know what it is.
No, she won't know what it is, Charlie. Nobody knows what that is.
Milk steak. Last but not least, we have Charlie's favorite food, milk steak. Milk steak is on the surface a very simple method of preparing a steak, but in reality, it has a massive depth of skill involved. To prepare a milk steak properly, you'll need a cow and a bucket. First, milk the cow and fill the bucket completely. Next, we are going to viciously beat the cow to death with the bucket of milk. And here is where the high skill cap comes in. Novices at milk steak will most assuredly spill all of the milk onto the ground as they simply bash the skull with the iron bucket. Sure, this will get you a steak at the end of the day, but it's not a true milk steak. Now, a master of milk steak is someone who can expertly lacerate the cow while pouring just enough milk into its open wounds to baste the fresh meat with the ideal quantity of milk, and without spilling a single drop. Now, milk steak, of course, is best eaten immediately while it's still dripping with hot blood and milk, and let me tell you, nothing at all compares to this. The flavor, the texture, They're both in perfect harmony. It may take you many years and thousands of attempts to get your first perfectly made milk steak, but I can't think of anything more worthwhile. And that's about it. We've covered a very wide array of ways to cook a steak today, from the successfully mundane to others that are a little more unethical. The main lesson to be learned here is that Minecraft is a game of endless creativity and imagination. I know we have all cooked many furnace steaks in our day, but it's important to branch out and try new things every once in a while. What's your favorite way of cooking steak in Minecraft? And are there any cooking methods that I didn't manage to cover in this video? Make sure to leave a comment to let everyone else know and subscribe for whenever I feel like making another video. It could be this year. I don't know.